The NBA season tips off with high hopes in Philadelphia, L.A., and where else? Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, and, of course, longtime NBA writer, columnist. He joins us here on the Sports Bash of the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as another season of NBA Hoops is here. Mitch, what is happening, my friend? How are you?
Well, I'll tell you what, despite the fact that Zion Williamson isn't playing tonight, they're still going to roll the balls out. We're going to have a season. Can you believe that? Everybody's going crazy about no Zion. Guess what? We don't have guys like Kevin Durant. We don't have proven players, Paul George, who aren't playing. We are finally going to play, and Zion's going to have to join the league already in progress after a couple of months.
Right. I know that when ESPN put this game on and they saw no Kawhi versus no Zion, that a Toronto-New Orleans doesn't have the same bite to it, does it?
Man. Need to flex that game in the worst way. Give me a little Atlanta-Memphis.
There you go.
It's a Thursday night football game.
Yeah, right? I mean, are they wearing color rush uniforms tonight? Let me ask you this, Mitch. First time in how long that the league feels open, or do you think there's a clear-cut favorite?
Well, I don't think it's as open as people think. I know there's some people who think there are 9 or 10 teams that can win. I think there are about 3.5. The half team is where you guys are in Philly. I've got my concerns about the Sixers. We'll get into that. I think Milwaukee and I think the 2 LA teams can win. What I look at is there a player on these teams, where at the end of a shot clock in a big playoff spot, somebody is going to get me a basket. Somebody's going to make something out of nothing. Somebody's going to make a big game-winning shot, a la Kawhi, a la Kevin Durant. And the league's missing a big piece there with Kevin Durant. A la maybe a LeBron. Maybe, Philadelphia, to me, and this is one of the problems I'm looking at, who is that player who Brett Brown can say, go get me a basket in May and June? I don't see a player on that team. I don't even know if Jimmy Butler was that player. He had the best chance to make something out of nothing. Now he's in Miami. And for when you want to talk about Joel Embiid, here's part 2 of my equation about the Sixers. He's got to become much more reliable. He only averaged 30 minutes a game in the playoffs last year. He came down with illnesses. He gives you more turnovers than assists. We all know he is a big-time talent, but he's tremendously flawed. And so somehow the Sixers are going to have to address those 2 items for me to see them come out of the East. Right now I've got Milwaukee coming out of the East.
All right, Mitch Lawrence with us. What are some, okay, obviously I think we all kind of wonder who is going to be that guy. What are you thinking about what Ben Simmons brings to the table this year? Are you buying that his game and his role will be expanded from what you've seen and what you've heard?
When I heard a player in the offseason tell me, I'm going to come back, I'm going to be better, I'm going to work hard on my jump shot, and I'm going to show what happened in the playoffs to me isn't going to happen again, the player I believe is Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's the guy who I believe. He's got the work ethic. I think he's got the right attitude. He's got the right mental, everything you want about a player, that drive, that desire, that competitive fire. I pick him over Ben Simmons. For Ben Simmons, I will believe it when I actually see it. And Giannis, too. I'm not just going to take his word. I think, though, that guy I can really depend upon more than a Ben Simmons. Right now, frankly, I think, Ben Simmons might be just one of these guys who comes back after he gets a big extension, big raise, and he gives you basically what he has given you, which is great. He's an all-star, but he's not that type of player who can get a team to another level.
All right, Mitch, so you're clearly a 76er hater going into this season. I think we can establish that. Yeah.
Here's the great thing about the day and age we live in. You just can't be critical. You can't critique a team. You have to be a hater. So, yeah, mark me down. I'm a hater.
No, I like that about you. You're either a hater or you're all in. No in between. Right. So let me ask you a question that a hater of this team would enjoy getting asked, and that is the offense and lack thereof. Is that more of a concern than it's being discussed? I mean, everyone's talking about the length, the athleticism, and the defensive nightmare that the Sixers are going to be for opposing teams. But you mentioned May and June, who's going to get them a bucket. Well, in those half-court sets on the offensive side of the ball, how ugly could that get?
As ugly as the last 2 minutes of Game 7 in Toronto. Remember how ugly that was?
That was really ugly.
That was, guys, it goes back to, Kawhi made an unbelievable shot. First time ever anybody closed out a Game 7 with a buzzer beater. The game sat there for the Sixers. Possession, I don't know, I charted it at the time. There were 3 or 4 possessions in that last 2 minutes. All they had to do was score a bucket or two, and they are going to the Eastern Conference Finals. And it's not the Raptors. So, yeah, it could get that ugly because Where's your shooting? Where's your three-point shooting? Where are the guys you can depend on to score down the stretch of the game? It could get ugly.
Do you think the Sixers will be a vastly different-looking team this year, Mitch, because of their emphasis now with Horford and Jay Rich here on defense and maybe not as much shooting without Redick?
Well, we all love the Horford pickup. I mean, that's a huge loss. It's one of these deals where it's a huge loss for Boston, and it's a huge gain, obviously, for the Sixers and how he's able to deal with Embiid. And he's just a class guy. He'll be great in the locker room. And he's been to some conference finals, so he's been through the wars that some of these guys haven't been. Obviously, I don't know how, they're still going to have – look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to 35 games. This is a team that's going to win in the regular season 50, 55 games, depending on, obviously, Embiid, how much they use him, load management, does he get hurt? Ben Simmons is going to be great. He'll be an all-star player. But, I don't know how different they are going to be because they've got those two guys. I mean, look, Tobias Harris first full season. We'll see what he gives them. Josh Richardson defensively, they'll be even better. Yeah, they're going to be. In my mind, the Clippers have the top defensive team because anytime you can put Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the floor with a guy like Patrick Beverley, those are outstanding defenders. But I think Philadelphia in the East might probably have the best defensive team. Offensively, could be a challenge for Brett Brown.
Let me ask you this, Mitch: the team that went 7 games, that missed, that late, that watched Kawhi hit that late bucket and did miss some opportunities. Is this Sixer team better than the one that left the floor in Toronto?
Well, I think that the Jimmy Butler, they're not better from the standpoint of they're missing a guy like a Jimmy Butler who showed you he could get his shot late in some games. Now, he didn't do it in that game, but, I think that's going to hurt. I think they're better from the standpoint of an Al Horford. They seem to always have depth issues, which we're going to see. I mean, how these things play out. We'll talk in March or February, and it'll be buyout season, and we'll see if they can add, subtract, whatever. There's still going to be a force. I think, there's a reason why everybody's picking Milwaukee, Philly 1-2, 2-1 in the East. And, we'll go from there. But, look, all these teams have warts. All these teams have some flaws. But, Philly's going to be obviously if people are picking them to come out of the East, I can't really argue with that except for the argument I gave you. And I think they still would have a hell of a shot against Milwaukee. It'd be a tough series, but I still like the Greek Freak at this point, even though, to me, Milwaukee, he doesn't have a number 2 star. Chris Middleton's a nice player. Don't get me wrong, but he's nothing more than a third-tier star on a championship-level team.
All right, Mitch, let me ask you about 2 players here for the Sixers. One, we've brought him up already, Horford, and his addition to the team. And how do you expect him to be used in the half-court sets? We talk about the offensive questions and potential concerns, so I want your thoughts there. And then, 2, the answer that I get when I ask anyone who's the X factor, who's the missing link, who needs to step up, you get Tobias Harris. So do you think Tobias Harris can fill that role? What do you expect from him, and how do you expect Horford's role to look like this year?
First on Tobias Harris, man, he had a great offseason, right, with the big contract, and people are touting him as being the late-game guy they can go to. I don't think he's ever really had that role in terms of a playoff player. We'll see what he does in a regular season. If he can emerge as that player, obviously that'd be great. And in terms of Al Horford, they're going to use him the same way Boston did. We all know he's more of a perimeter threat. He's not a big-time scorer, but he can make a jump shot now and then. He can make a 3 now and then. He's going to be, he's going to give you everything he's got. He's going to add a lot to that team, what they need. But anything you saw him do for Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta and then later for Brad Stevens in Boston offensively, I'm sure Brett Brown has gone to school on those things, and that's the way they'll use him.
Speaking of Boston, where are they at right now with losing Horford but bringing in Kemba Walker, bringing in Cantor? Do you see them as, without Kyrie, as being a little bit better for what Brad Stevens wants to do, or are they still kind of far behind the Philly Milwaukees of the world, of the East?
Yeah, I think they're a tier down. Look, we all know that Kyrie was a disaster there last year. Teammates hated him. He didn't get along with them. I'm sure he had problems with Brad Stevens. This thing did not work out. I mean, this time, a year ago, this time, he was basically telling everybody, well, I'll be signing long-term here if they'll have me back. And at that time, they thought they wouldn't. They thought they could get Anthony Davis in the trade. And, I mean, you talk about a team that had a rough offseason. Nobody had a worse offseason than Golden State, losing Kevin Durant, the breakup of the super team. I'd argue Boston had the second worst offseason in terms of their game plan was originally, re-sign Kyrie long-term, max him out, go get Anthony Davis with people like Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and hit everybody in the East over the head with a combination of Kyrie and Anthony Davis, and retain Al Horford. Now, they came up 0 for 3. So Danny Ainge had a bad offseason. And now I think they made the best of a bad situation in terms of, look, Kyrie, as much of a disaster he was in terms of being a leader, in terms of which he was totally miscast, the number one option, he was a disaster with that. And in the locker room, they've got the guy who's going to be a lot better. I mean, Kemba Walker in Charlotte didn't have a lot of success, but what was he in terms of a teammate? He was an outstanding leader, great teammate for Charlotte, and I think he'll get along much better. Now, talent level-wise, we talk about who can get me a shot late in a shot clock, end of game. That's Kyrie Irving. And I'm not telling you he's the number one option. I'm going to tell you he's a pretty good number two option when it comes to that. We'll see that next year if Kevin Durant is okay. But to replace, for Danny Ainge to lose that talent like a Kyrie and to bring in Kemba Walker, not the same player, but he'll give you more. He's going to be a big addition in the locker room. That's going to help Brad Stevens. Yeah, front court-wise, the loss of Horford hurts. They don't have a lot of size. Enes Kanter's a total one-way player. Danny Ainge has to do something along the front line. Now, they're going to try to win those games with Gordon Hayward, who the claim is he looks like Gordon Hayward pre-leg injury, Marcus Smart, Kemba Walker, and, of course, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. That's a pretty good fivesome there. Depth-wise, it's going to be a problem for Boston. So I'd say, look, this time last year, what were you all talking about? A lot of us were talking about, I picked Boston to go to the finals, and they turned out to be a hot mess. That was a team that really underachieved for the talent that they had because guys didn't accept roles. Terry Rozier, we know that, and Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum had problems. So I think this year they'll be better in terms of role acceptance, right? When these guys get assigned these roles, I think that's good for Brad Stevens. There were too many guys last year, too many prima donnas like Kyrie, and I still think Boston, though, when they go up against Philly, when they go up against Milwaukee, they'll be tough outs because guys have experience there from the playoff runs that they've had, a couple of Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't know if they have enough talent to get by those teams.
Mitch Lawrence, host of SiriusXM NBA Radio, and of course the NBA opens up tonight. Philly and the Bucks. I think a lot of people like one of those two. Is there even a number 3? Is there a challenger to those two in the East?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, Boston to me has still the best because they've got some guys like I love Tatum, and I think Brown got vastly overpaid, but good for him. He's making almost $30 million a year. He's a $20 million player. If you look at his statistics and look what he's done, but they'll be a good to a very good team. They're not going to be a great team. And then you have your typical, your Indianas. They're not going anywhere without Victor Oladipo. The Sabonis signing was important for them. But I don't think Jimmy Butler all of a sudden is going to vault Miami into a top, 3 team in the East. I mean, never say never. It is the East. It's pretty lousy at the bottom, so you're going to have maybe you'll get some, young teams that are on the rise, maybe a Chicago or Atlanta that'll go after 8th place. But no, I think it's really clear-cut Philly, Milwaukee, and then a big drop-off to number 3.
Yeah, and I know that right now a lot of people like Philly and Milwaukee. If there were a couple of reasons why you like Milwaukee better than Philly right now, because some people texting in while they're listening, all right, who makes that shot for the Bucks? I mean, Antetokounmpo is not a great shot maker. I mean, he can take the ball to the basket, but if you're asking him to take a perimeter shot, that's a tough night. We saw it last year in the playoffs. He struggled in that role as guy late. So, give us the breakdown between those two.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that I think Giannis can be that type of player, and it may happen this spring. And I'm kind of counting on him to show that type of development. I think we all look at him and say, yeah, this is the guy who he hasn't done it so far, and Toronto really showed his flaws and exposed his weaknesses, which is what happens, as you guys know, in the 7-game playoffs. Everybody's flaws and weaknesses are exposed, and teams go to town on those opponents. So what I'm counting on is Giannis taking his game to another level. They do have Middleton. I'm not totally impressed with guys like Middleton, Bledsoe, et cetera. So it's going to have to be Giannis. But I like, they've got a team that has got a lot of guys back from last year. Yep, they've got some guys who are still missing. They've added Korver. I mean, I'm just looking at it from the standpoint, I think they're just a better team right now. Now, Philadelphia, who knows? During the regular season, they could surprise a lot of us. Tobias Harris could emerge. You could get Joel Embiid playing like an MVP, as some people have him, and then I'll change my mind. But going into the season, I would pick the Bucks over Philadelphia.
So, Mitch, Mike asked you any other teams in the East, because all of the talk is Milwaukee and Philadelphia. So I want to flip it and go out west to the Western Conference. Once again, all the talk, Lakers, Clippers for the most part, and a team that's intriguing, and I'm sure you have your eyes on them, the Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
What can they do?
Teams, they could be a candidate for the hot mess, the team like Boston last year that everybody kind of picks. And, the one thing about, they got a coach on the hot seat. First of all, they got a GM on the hot seat because of what happened in China. But on the court, they got a coach on the hot seat. Mike D'Antoni never got an extension. He's a lame duck. Yes, they added Russell Westbrook to James Harden, and both these guys are talking about, we've played before in Oklahoma City and we can work things out. Remains to be seen. Guys, they played together before both of these guys were MVPs of the league, and there are egos there now, and there's, those considerations you always have. I just don't know. I think here's what we'll see from Houston. They're going to be as great as they usually are in the regular season. Now, last year, they got off to a very bad start. They stayed with D'Antoni, as you remember, and they parlayed that into a pretty good finish, and then they came up short against Golden State. So the best thing for them is that Golden State no longer is a super team because, 4 out of the last 5 years, I think they got knocked out of the playoffs by the Warriors. But even so, in the playoffs, I still have to see James Harden have big-time playoff games like he has in the regular season. His regular season game does not translate well to the playoffs. And we all know Russell Westbrook has got high turnovers. He's gotten poor shot selection. I'm not sold on him. I've basically been downgrading him over the last few years because of those two things. And so, look, regular season-wise, they're going to be tough to beat. We know that James Harden will put up some astronomical, prolific numbers where you're comparing him to Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain and Kobe Bryant. And then what happens in the playoffs? Things slow down. They play up, we meet up against a good defensive team, and those guys struggle. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was another one of years where Houston comes up.
All right, Mitch Lawrence. By the way, the Lakers, it sounds like you think they're going to be very good and make the playoffs, which means somebody in the West is out. Who's that team that the Lakers knock out in the West?
Oklahoma City. They're not going to make it. We'll see if Chris Paul is moved. They've got Gallinari, but that he lost Paul George and Russell Westbrook. Now, Russell Westbrook never got out of the first round once Kevin Durant left. So you got to take that in consideration. But I just think that, look, I'm not going to say that the Spurs are going to miss the playoffs because the Spurs don't miss the playoffs. Spurs make the playoffs, and it'll be like, 23 straight years, which is unbelievable, the job that they've done. I still like Golden State, although I am worried about Golden State. We heard today Steve Kerr, and he might just be saying this to keep people off their backs, but won't have Klay Thompson for the whole year. Now, you lost so much talent there. You lose a Kevin Durant. You lose an Andre Iguodala. You don't have a Klay Thompson now. You lose a Sean Livingston. That team's going to make the playoffs now with Steph Curry, who has played 100-plus extra games over the last 5 years in terms of playoff action. That's adding to his talking about taking the tread off the tire. How much is he going to be load managed? How good is their defense going to be? Who's going to make shots besides Curry for them now? They could have a big fall. They could go down from 1 to 8 or 9. They may now make the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see. But the one thing I'm going to tell you about the Lakers is I think the Lakers have a chance to be a hot mess too. I think LeBron's going to have a better year. I think Anthony Davis will probably have his best year because he's going to be, he'll be in the right situation where he's not the leader. He'll be number 2 behind LeBron and falling perfectly there. Here's my problem with them. Their defense is going to be bad. They got guys who, you look at their names, you go, wow, they got Danny Green. Danny Green on the perimeter, I don't think he's stopping anybody. They've got, Avery Bradley, but they've got an old Dwight Howard. You know what I'm talking about. They've got guys who have name recognition, but I think defensively, that's where they are really going to struggle. So I don't think the Lakers are the team to beat in L.A. It's the Clippers because the Clippers give you the Finals MVP, Kawhi Leonard, who will play more than 60. He missed 22 games last year for load management. He'll give you a 70-plus games, I would think. They'll get Paul George back. They'll have a hell of a defensive team, and they still have guys like Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams. So I like the Clippers a lot more than the Lakers.
Mitch Lawrence, of course, an NBA season is ready to tip off tonight. And, of course, the Sixers and Celtics tomorrow. Listen to it on 97.3 ESPN at Mitch_Lawrence. Listen to him on SiriusXM NBA radio and throughout the NBA season right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, Mitch.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.